you would like to be able to get all the way down to the ground. If you can't, play with the range of motion that you have available, and then eventually, as you get stronger, you should be able to go all the way down to the ground and then pull yourself all the way back up. But for now,
hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. Steven here with Team Euphoric, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to be your own therapist by demonstrating the top 5 strengthening exercises for posture correction. And more specifically, we're going to be focusing on how to correct a lower cross syndrome. Before I actually get on with the exercise, I first want to explain what exactly lower cross syndrome is and why exactly you should care. And in order to do that, I'm going to need the help of my good friend, Johnny Bones. So Johnny, get over here and turn to the side so everybody can see your lovely hips. With regard to lower cross syndrome, there are a couple of different ways in which it can present. The presentation we're going to be focusing on for today is when it presents with anteversion of the pelvis and hyperlordosis in the lumbar spine. But when that happens, you're going to get flexion of the femur or the hip, you're going to get anteversion of the pelvis, excessive hyperlordosis in the lumbar spine, and then hyperkyphosis in the thoracolumbar spine, so where the lower thoracic spine meets the lumbar spine. With regard to the pelvis, for men, anywhere from 4 to 7 degrees of anterior pelvic tilt is going to be considered normal, and for women, anywhere from 7 to 11 degrees of anterior pelvic tilt is going to be considered normal. Whenever it goes beyond that range, that is when it is going to be considered dysfunctional, and if you don't address it, it can lead to things like low back pain, hip pain, knee pain, ankle pain, and a whole host of other issues, so you would want to address it as soon as possible. And one of the ways in which we can address this would be to do some strengthening exercises for the muscles that are responsible for posteriorly tilting the pelvis. That's what we're going to be doing for you guys today. So without further ado, here are the top 5 strengthening exercises for posture correction to correct lower cross syndrome. The first strengthening exercise for lower cross syndrome is going to be for the gluteus maximus muscle, and we're going to be doing the 4-part glute series. For the 4-part glute series, we're going to be in a supine position, meaning you're laying down on your back, and we're going to be targeting all of the different fibers in the gluteus maximus. If you recall from earlier videos, when we end up doing the 4-part glute series, we're going to be targeting the glutes from the most lateral to the most medial. So we're going to do the Latero-Lateral fibers, the Medio-Lateral fibers, the Latero-Medial fibers, and the Medio-Medial fibers. So if you could imagine it, imagine cutting your glutes in half. You have the lateral half and the medial half. The lateral half is the part closer to the outside. The medial half is the part closer to the midline. And then on the lateral aspect, the lateral-most portion is going to be the Latero-Lateral fibers, and then the medial portion of the lateral aspect is going to be the Medio-Lateral fibers. Then in the medial portion, the lateral-most portion is going to be the Medio-Lateral or the Latero-Medial portion, and then the most medial is going to be the Medio-Medial. But everything is going to be exactly the same. The only difference is going to be how we play with the level of abduction and adduction in the femur and the level of internal and external rotation. For each of them, you want to be in a supine position, and this first variation is going to be for the Latero-Lateral fiber, so the outermost portion. What we want to do is you are going to lay down on your back. You want to maintain retroversion of the pelvis, flat lumbar spine, flat thoracic, your chin is tucked in, the crown of your head is pushing away, your eyes are looking down at the floor to put the dura mater under tension with your arms. You want them at the level of the glenohumeral angle, and then for this one, the Latero-Lateral fibers are going to have your feet apart, so hip width apart, and then you want to squeeze your knees together. And what you can do is take a business card, place it between your knees, and squeeze it together to act as a biofeedback mechanism. Then, from this position, what you want to do is you are going to roll and unroll the spine one vertebrae at a time, and then come all the way back down by unrolling it one vertebrae at a time without letting the glute touch the ground. You're then going to come right back up and come back down without losing the retroversion of the pelvis. If you end up losing the retroversion of the pelvis, then that means you went too far. Then, if we want to get a little bit more medial and target the medial-lateral fibers, all we're going to do is we are going to bring the feet together and the knees together, but everything else is exactly the same. You could take that business card, squeeze it in between your knees, arms at the glenohumeral angle, flat lumbar, flat thoracic, chin tucked in, crown away, eyes looking down between the thighs with the dura mater under tension, and then we want to roll and unroll the spine one vertebrae at a time as high as we can without losing the retroversion of the pelvis, and then come right back down without letting the glutes touch the ground. And that is for the medial-lateral fibers. Next, if we want to target the lateral-medial fibers, so the outer portion of the inner portion, then what we would do is the typical hip bridge that you see most people doing in the gym. You would go feet apart, knees apart. Everything else is exactly the same. Retroversion of pelvis, flat lumbar, flat thoracic, chin tucked in, crown of the head away, eyes looking down between our thighs to put the dura mater under tension. With the arms, we're going to go at the level of the glenohumeral angle, and then we want to roll and unroll the spine one vertebrae at a time, and then come back down without letting the glutes touch. And the entire time we want to make sure that we are maintaining that retroversion of the pelvis. And then the last version is going to be for the medial fibers. That's going to be the innermost fibers of the gluteus maximus muscle. For this one, all we're going to do differently is we're going to place our feet together,
And then we want to go into abduction of the femur. So we're going to separate our legs by going into abduction and external rotation as much as we can without letting the navicular leave the ground. So you want to maintain a flat arch the entire time. As soon as the arch starts to lift, you've gone too far. So right now, everything else the same. Retroversion of pelvis, flat lumbar, flat thoracic, chin tucked in, crown of the head away, eyes looking down between our thighs to put the dramatic under tension, arms at the level of the glenohumeral angle. We are going to go into extension by bringing our hips toward the sky, one vertebrae at a time, without letting the retroversion of the pelvis get lost. And then we're going to come back down without letting the glutes touch the ground. And that is for the medial fibers. Next, the second strengthening exercise for lower cross syndrome is going to be for the gluteus medius. Specifically, we're going to be targeting the posterior fibers because the posterior fibers are responsible for retroversion of the pelvis. For the gluteus medius, we want to be in a side lying position. So you're going to go ahead, lay down on your side, and you could rest your head on your arm. Then from this position right over here, bottom leg, you want to go ahead and flex your hip and knee, and with the top arm, you're going to hold onto your knee to maintain the retroversion of the pelvis. Then, with the top leg, that's going to be the working leg. What we want to do is we're going to flex the hip to 90 degrees. So you're going to bring it forward. You want to maintain a slight flexion in the knee. The reason we're flexing the knee is because we want to release the tension on the tensor fasciae lati muscle to get maximum recruitment of the gluteus medius muscle. Then, from this position right over here, we got retroversion of pelvis, flat lumbar, flat thoracic, our chin is tucked in, crown of the head away, eyes looking down at the floor to put the dura mater under tension. And then all we want to do is go into abduction of the femur at 90 degrees while maintaining a vertical pelvis. So when we go up, we don't want to rotate our body. We want our pelvis to remain vertical the entire time. And that is the strengthening exercise for the gluteus medius muscle, specifically the posterior fibers. Next, the third exercise, the third strengthening exercise for lower cross syndrome is going to be for the gluteus minimus muscle. And once again, we're going to be targeting specifically the posterior fibers because the posterior fibers are responsible for retroversion of the pelvis. Again, we're going to be in a side lying position, and for this one, again, we're going to flex and hip the bottom of flex and the hip and knee of the bottom leg, only this time it's going to have a little bit less flexion. We'll flex it to about 45 degrees at the hip, 90 degrees at the knee. From this position right over here, the top leg, that's going to be the leg we're working. We want to flex it to 90 degrees, and we want the knee at 90 degrees. Then we want to take something like a yoga block or anything to prop our knee up so that our femur is parallel to the ground. From this position right over here, all we want to do is go into medial rotation of the femur. But first, we're going to go into dorsiflexion of the ankle by pointing the toes toward our head, and then eversion by pointing the sole of the foot up toward the sky. And then we're just going to lower our foot down toward the ground and then raise it up to the sky. And this is the strengthening exercise for the gluteus minimus muscle, specifically the posterior fibers. Next, the fourth strengthening exercise for lower cross syndrome is going to be for the proximal hamstrings. The hamstrings, we're going to be doing them in a kneeling position, and it's essentially a Nordic curl, and I'm going to be playing around with the different foot positions to target the different hamstring muscles. Remember, we have three. We have the semimembranosus, which is the most medial, so closest to the inside. Then we have the semitendinosus next to that, and then the biceps femoris is the most lateral. With the biceps femoris, we have both the long head and the short head. The long head is the one we're going to be targeting because the long head is the only one that actually crosses the hip. The short head of the biceps femoris is only responsible in knee flexion. But anyway, what we're going to do for this one, I'm going to be using a plyo box with a nice little pad right over here to kneel on. If you have an actual Nordic bench, you can use that, but personally, I find $700 a little bit of a waste of money just for one exercise, so you can get a lot of usage out of this. And if you don't have this, you can also have a partner press down on your ankles while you're performing this exercise. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to take the plyo box. What you want to do is you are going to place something on the actual barbell to weigh your ankles down. That way you don't end up falling off. And then what you want to do, you're going to get into position. So you're going to dangle your feet right off the edge. For this first variation, we're going to be targeting the semitendinosus. So you want your ankles in line with your knees. Then you want to go ahead and take your barbell, and then you're going to roll it up onto your heels. Once you've rolled it up onto your heels, we're all set up. So you want to get nice and tall, and you want to maintain retroversion of the pelvis. That's going to be very important. The entire time, don't lose that retroversion of the pelvis. Once we are in this position, this is going to be for the semitendinosus. And what we want to do is you are going to go as much into knee extension as possible without losing the retroversion of the pelvis. And ideally, you would like to be able to get all the way down to the ground. If you can't, play with the range of motion that you have available. And then eventually, as you get stronger, you should be able to go all the way down to the ground and then pull yourself all the way back up. But for now, just play with the range of motion that you have available, and there are different ways that you can progress it. And then if you want to target different fibers, let's say you want to target the semimembranosus. Because the semimembranosus is the most medial, we're going to go into slight adduction of the femur, and we're going to go into slight medial rotation of the femur as well, and then the exact same thing. Arms down by your side, and you're going to go down, and you want to go into as much possible extension of the knee as you can without losing that retroversion of the pelvis. And then if we want to target the biceps femoris, which is the most lateral, we're going to go into slight lateral rotation of the femur. So knees are going to be hip width apart, ankles inside of the knees, and then once again, we are going to lower down all the way down to the ground as much as we can without losing that retroversion of the pelvis. And that was the strengthening exercise for the proximal hamstrings. And then last, the fifth and final strengthening exercise for lower cross syndrome is going to be for the rectus abdominis, and specifically, we are going to be targeting the subumbilical fibers, so the lower abdominals. For this exercise right over here, you're going to be in a supine position, meaning you're laying down on your back. Once you are in this position, you want to flex your hips and knees to 90 degrees. Then, dorsiflexion of ankles, eversion of ankles. You want to maintain retroversion of the pelvis, flat lumbar, flat thoracic, chin tucked in, crown and head away, eyes looking down between your thighs to put the dura mater under tension with the arms at the level of the glenohumeral angle. And then all you want to do for this one, because it's the subumbilical, the umbilical is roughly at the level of L3, so we want to project our knees up toward the sky, up to the level of the L3, no higher than that, and then come back down one vertebrae at a time. For most people, this is going to be very difficult, and you're not going to be able to get a whole lot of motion the very first time that you try it, but play around with the motion you have available. If all you're able to do is this, just 1 millimeter off the ground, that's fine. Once you get stronger, eventually, you're going to be able to lift your knees a little bit higher and come back down. The one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to flex your hips. So you don't want to go up and bring your knees toward your chest. You just want to go straight up to the sky and then come right back down. But that was the strengthening exercise for the rectus abdominis, specifically the subumbilical fibers.
And there you have it. Those were the top 5 strengthening exercises for posture correction to correct lower cross syndrome. If you have lower cross syndrome, or if you have issues with regard to low back pain, hip pain, knee pain, ankle pain, go ahead and give those exercises a try. And with regard to the sets and repetitions, what you would want to do for each of the exercises is 3 sets of 50 repetitions, and that's 5-0, not 1-5. The reason we're going so high with the repetitions is because we're trying to elicit a postural change. And whenever we're trying to elicit a postural change, one of the most important things is going to be accumulating time under tension. And if we do the typical 8 to 12 bodybuilding repetition rep range, we're not going to be able to accumulate that time under tension. So 3 sets of 50 repetitions is what you want to do. And if you've given these exercises a try, go ahead and drop your comments down in the comment section and let me know how exactly did you guys feel when you did them. And if you have any questions, go ahead and ask your questions down in the comment section. In a couple days on Saturday, I'm going to be going through the top 5 myofascial stretching exercises for posture correction to correct lower cross syndrome. Those are going to be a terrific complement to the exercises that we did today, but be out on the lookout for that Saturday at 10 o'clock a.m. But that's pretty much it for today's video. If you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to smash that like button so I know to keep making these types of videos in the future. And if you're either new to the channel or haven't subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, as I will be uploading new videos every single day. That's it for today's video. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you again tomorrow.